G'day everyone, welcome back to True Eagle. Today we're going to preview Friday Night Clash. What a blockbuster fixture that is against the Gold Coast Suns. I had previously indicated I'm going to do the previews for these games once the teams come out, but the teams come out Thursday. And so, dropping a preview Friday morning didn't make that much sense to me. If there's something to talk about from the selection, which it could be this week, there's a bit going on, then I might just do another video anyway. But I intend to upload daily this week. So let's talk about this clash against the Suns. I usually start with last time we met. So we did meet these guys earlier in the year at People's First Stadium. This was straight off the bat of the last derby, actually. Obviously, we had come off a couple of wins, and we were playing a pretty good brand, number 2 in the league for contested ball. But things are very different this time now that we're meeting them. And last time they did beat us by 6 goals. And it wasn't a shameful performance, although it's worth looking at some of the numbers. I know some of you don't like me looking at numbers. I'm going to keep doing it and really break down exactly what happened. So for context, we decided to rest Harley Reid. He probably wouldn't have won us the game, but it probably did contribute to some of these numbers I'm going to get to. So we lost 112 to 75. We lost the third term by nearly all of that margin. 38 to 7 was the third term. So it really was a game where, we stuck fat with them. We were down by 3 points at half time, blown away in the third term, steadied a little bit in the last quarter. Very similar to last week's derby. And what is also worth noting is we kicked 12 goals 3 that day, which means that we were very accurate, which, sort of suggests that we probably should have been a little bit further down, although we did get within the 3 goals in the dying minutes of that game. So the inside 50 count in that game was 67 to 35. So a real walloping, and the clearances were 48 to 31. So Reid, he's just come off a 10 clearance game. He might have contributed a little bit to that and helped us, but, other than that, we got well beaten by a side that is much better than us. The last time we played them at Optus is probably going back a little bit too far, simply because I think we've evolved. We haven't improved a whole heap, but we've certainly evolved from what we were in round 9 of 2023, which is where the injuries really started to take hold of us, and we started to get a little bit, pathetic. We lost that game by 70 points. I don't think there's too much to read into that, other than the fact that Gold Coast are okay at Optus Stadium, really. So let's talk about how the Suns are going. Now, if you've been watching football at all this year, you're probably aware of the narrative that they have won all of their home games until last week, where they lost their first home game against the Lions, and they have lost all of their games away from Metricon Stadium this year, which is quite crazy. Well, sort of. I mean, we haven't won a game outside of Perth this year either, interestingly. However, this presents a big opportunity for them to claim a win away from home for the first time this year. In terms of their current form line, they're 2-3. Those 2 wins were both at home against the Pies and the Power. They had lost to North at Marvel Stadium in that time, obviously lost to the Brisbane Lions as well. But generally speaking, they're 13th on the ladder, 9 wins and 10 losses. So talking about, the threats in this game of which we need to be aware, there's plenty. They've got a very good midfield, a very two-dimensional midfield in the sense that they are very damaging going forward with the footy, but also quite defensively sound as well. So you got guys like Rowell, Anderson, Flanders in particular, who are going to be very tough opponents for our midfield, which has been lacking for many years now, to be honest. And you also consider that they've got a very strong ruck division. Jared Witts is a very good tap ruckman and a very big physical specimen. And I think he's about 209 centimeters as well. So I think that's something we need to consider with selection this week, making sure we have an adequate ruck combo to take on guys like Witts and Ned Moyle as well, who is young, but still a fairly good tap ruckman, I reckon, and long term will probably be a good player in my personal opinion. So they've got great clearance midfield, it's defensively sound, they've got great tap ruckman. At either ends of the ground, they're pretty solid as well. I mean, certainly in terms of individuals, Sam Collins has had a great season down back. Within the mix for All-Australian, I would have thought Mac Andrews has been a breakout player for them. Charlie Ballard is also a great player. Up forward, their biggest threat has been Ben King, and he has been, unreal this year, although he is currently having the yips. I think kicked 0 goals 3 or 1 goal 3 in the last 2 weeks. So what's that, 1 goal 6? A little bit out of form, which hopefully continues just for one more week, but he is a genuine Coleman contender. So look, they're a pretty balanced side. They've got stars all over the field, or at least very good players that can make this game tough for us. So on paper, It's a bad start to this game. We'll run through a little bit of a stats profile. There's nothing that's outstanding about the Gold Coast Suns. It's been a topsy-turvy year, and I think that really speaks to how inconsistent they've been, and therefore their stats are all across the middle, really. So they're middle of the pack for contested ball and below average for uncontested ball. They are top 6 in the league for inside 50 differential and second in the league for generating total inside 50. So their ranking comes down because they presumably concede a fair few inside 50s as well, but they get the ball inside 50 really well, as evidenced by the fact that last time we played them, they got the ball inside 50 67 times, and we are going to be without Tom Barrass in this game, and we will get to selection in this, but it's worth considering. They get the ball inside 50 really consistently. They're also the number 3 team in the league for scores from turnover, which again is where we get burned quite consistently. In terms of clearances, they're only middle of the pack, and that's a little bit alarming considering how badly they smashed us in this stat last time. They're also top 4 in the league for tackles inside 50, so they get the ball in the inside 50 plenty of times, and presumably they keep it inside 50 fairly well if they're laying top 4 amounts of tackles inside 50. So that's just a good profile of our opponent. I think there's a good version of Gold Coast that is finals quality, and I think there is a version of Gold Coast that failed to get over the mental hurdles when they're away from home. It doesn't really make me that much more confident this week. I think when you look at the two teams on paper, this will be a very tough challenge. But I will say I do think this is winnable. It just depends which West Coast comes out. Now, we're becoming increasingly removed from some of our best footy. I mean, we played really well for a half against Fremantle. If we can replicate that, we can win this game. But I am done backing us in prior to the game starting. All right, let's talk about selection. So we have a number of forced changes, okay? So if you haven't caught the news, we had 2 suspensions. Jack Petruccelli got rubbed out for a week for that unlucky hit on Sean Darcy. Not really his fault. That's just the way the game's going now. We didn't decide to appeal it. I thought we might. Whatever, Petruccelli's out this week. Hutchinson is similarly out. If you didn't see it, his act was a little bit more like Maynard on Brayshaw, except, well, it was another Brayshaw this time, but it didn't end in concussion. He's still got a week for that, so yeah, riddle me that. But anyway, we're going to be without those 2 players. The annoying aspect of that is just that they're both forwards, and they've also got a bit of speed, so that does create a bit of a issue for us trying to cram more forwards into this team, but I will talk about who I'd bring in. We've also recently heard that Tom Barrass will be out with concussion. He had a delayed onset concussion symptoms from that derby, and the same thing for Luke Edwards, another concussion for him. That's his third this year. That's really concerning, so hopefully he's okay. He might miss more than 1 week if it's his third one this season. With the backdrop of the Brad Shepherd thing going on at the moment, we need to make sure we manage that carefully for his well-being as much as anything. Zane True is a test. Obviously, he got subbed out in the opening 10 seconds of the derby. It was a neck injury, not a concussion, and he's a fitness test to play this week. There was no structural damage, so I'm not too sure whether he's going to play this week, but I think we'll assume for now that he's probably going to be fit and available. In more promising news, McGovern is fit this week, you'd think. He was a laid out, I think, wasn't he, for the derby, but he should come in, and that's timely with Tom Barrass being injured. Liam Duggan should also return from his concussion. Obviously, they held him out an extra week last week, and he should be fit to go. So let's talk about the changes that I personally would make. So we'll start off with the obvious one. McGovern comes in for Barrass. I think that's a like for like. Duggan probably comes in for Luke Edwards. Duggan has been playing a little bit more midfield than he previously was over the course of this season, so that's somewhat like for like. So then we talk about the 2 suspended players, Hutchinson and Petruccelli, okay? We actually don't have too many forwards that are like banging down the door to come into this team, and one of them is Tyrell Dewar, and from what I can gather, he's actually playing a little bit higher up the ground at waffle level, getting a little bit more of the ball, not hitting the scoreboard as much, but nonetheless, still a player I think we absolutely pick. He played well on the weekend, 18 possessions, so, I think he's one of those players we need to give games to. And I think with 2 forward line suspensions, this is the perfect opportunity to get him into the team. So then the other forward spot, I mean, we do need to consider that Jai Cully is still technically, he's in the team, but he's not. He was a sub on the weekend. Do we play him forward in this game? As a defensive forward, I don't love it, but, you're probably looking at like Locke Rawlinson outside of that, if you decided to go like for like. So that's probably what I would do. I'd probably just bring Cully into the 22. Then I would make one other change based on the ruck strength, the strength of the ruck duo of the Gold Coast Suns. I said the same thing about Sean Darcy and Luke Jackson, that Jack Williams and Bailey Williams would be a little bit undermanned and undersized to go against those guys. And I think they probably played Flynn in the waffle just because that was the best thing for him and his conditioning. Now, if Flynn is fit, then this would be a good week to bring him in. And I would do it at the expense of Jack Darling. You have to drop a tall forward to bring in Flynn. You can't go with Oscar Allen, Jake Waterman, Jack Williams, and Bailey Williams, and Jack Darling. That's 5, plus the actual number 1 ruck in this team. That would be ridiculous. So if Flynn comes in, you have to drop a tall, and I think we're all probably in agreement, given where we're at, it's got to be Jack Darling. It still probably makes us a little bit tall. However, at least all of the forwards, I would say are pretty much best 22. Bailey Williams is probably lucky to survive, but he played well in the Derby. I thought he played quite well. I wouldn't drop Bailey Williams on that. And again, if it's a question between Bailey Williams playing as that forward that he hasn't really succeeded as yet, or Jack Darling in this team, you tell me, what do you think is the best for this club at the moment? At least a Flynn-Williams combo in the ruck, and Jack Williams playing a little bit more forward is at least more in line with how we see this team going in the future. So that's my logic for that. So if Flynn comes in at all, this is time to drop Jack Darling. So that means the sub spot is open because I've brought Cully into this team. Now, first of all, you consider the fact that Zane True might not get up. So who are the options for Zane True? Dare I say it, Campbell Chesser is probably the next one. I'm not a huge fan of dropping him 1 week, bringing him back in, dropping him again, bringing him back the next week. So then you're really into the Gaff and Sheed territory. Other than that, there's Clay Hall. Clay Hall played on the wing in the Waffle and had 15 possessions. Again, if he's playing on the wing, we have seen time and time again, low possession counts for this team. So I'm not too sure if I'd hold that against him. So to replace Zane True, like I said, it's Chesser, Gaff, Sheed, or Hall. And I'd probably go Clay Hall. I know he hasn't really earned it, but look, we're in the last month of the season now. Might as well trial something new, and I think there is something to be gained for Chesser playing a game of Waffle again in the midfield and just continue to build that confidence. So I don't feel strongly about that. You could go with Chesser, whatever. The thing is, there's probably also an argument for Gaff. And the reason being is we're probably going to be giving him a farewell game at some point. Now, this week probably just makes sense with the amount of forced changes. We've also got a better chance of winning this week than the next home game we have, which I think is Carlton. I think that's our last home game of the year. Which one would you rather be your farewell game? So that's just an option. As for Dom Sheed, I have to say he's a contender. I don't necessarily want him in this team, but he is a contender given where we're at the moment in terms of availability. So, Chesser and Hall will be my preferences, but we'll see. But my ideal scenario is that Zane True plays, but then you still got to pick one of Chesser, Hall, Gaff, Sheed as sub, and I'd probably debut Clay Hall as the sub. As for some other options there, so Rotham survives in this team due to height because then we've got Harry Edwards, Jeremy McGovern, and then a genuine third tall, and they've got Ben King, Jack Lukosius, and then I presume maybe Ned Moore rest forward. That's a good question, actually. It really kind of depends what Gold Coast do with this team, because maybe you could drop Rotham, but if we do that, I would probably just bring in Witherden, because out of the two, who's been the best performed this year, I'd say Witherden, even though he's frustrated me at times. So I'd say we'll keep the mix of 2 genuine key backs and Rotham as the third tall. I think he survives on that basis. Harvey Johnston is a player I wanted to come into this side, but due to various reasons, he's only played 1 game in the last month because he's been traveling emergency, or there's been a waffle buy, or something like that. So I suspect he's probably not going to play AFL, given he's just missed a fair bit of conditioning there, which is unfortunate, but that's the way it is. I certainly wouldn't complain if he's picked as sub, though. That would be kind of cool to see. But time for a prediction. I think we can win this game if we throw everything at it, and it's possible. It's possible. But on the data, I just don't want to back us in. And honestly, I have not got a single tip right when I've tipped West Coast this year. So for all of our sakes, I'm tipping the Gold Coast Suns by 3 goals, and hopefully the Eagles prove me wrong. I do have a little feeling we'll play well, but I'm kind of sick of saying that and getting it burned every time on this channel. But I will go into this game with some optimism like I do for every single other one. But let me know in the comments what you're feeling about this game, any thoughts on the changes. Like I said, you'll be watching this a day before the teams come out, and maybe there'll be more to talk about when the team changes are. Maybe we'll get a debut from Clay Hall. That would be exciting, but at the moment it's just guesswork. So let me know in the comments what you think, and I'll see you in the next one. Go Eagles.